Okay, so now that we are familiar with the definition of a circle, let's go ahead and try some example problems. So in this first example, they want us to write the standard form of the equation of a circle. So it says write the standard form of the equation of the circle with radius 5 and center -3, 6. So first of all, we need to pay attention to the directions of this problem. So it says to write our equation in standard form. So in order to do that, we got to remember what standard form of a circle is. So standard form, from our definition, said that x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. Okay, so remember they told us if we're in standard form that the center is hk and the radius is equal to r. So as we look through the prompt of this problem, we need to figure out, did they give us any of that information? So we can see right here that they said that the radius is 5, and they told us that the center is -3, 6. So it looks like we should be all set to go. So all we need to do is plug in that information into standard form. So since we know our center, we know that -3 is h, and we know that 6 is k. So we need to plug those values into our standard form of our equation. So we're going to have x minus -3 squared plus y minus 6 squared equals, and our radius is 5, so that means that's our r. So we're going to say that equals 5 squared. Now we're not going to leave it like this, we're going to simplify it. So remember, we're going to use order of operations. So order of operations says you do anything inside of parentheses or grouping symbols first. So we have this negative times a negative. We know that anytime we have that, that gives us a positive. So we're going to have x plus 3 squared plus, as we look inside of this parentheses, there's nothing else that we can do. It's just y minus 6. So we're going to leave it. Y minus 6 squared equals, and then at the back part we have 5 squared, which we know is 25. Okay, so we've plugged in our center, we plugged in our radius, so this is our answer. This is our equation in standard form. So not too bad. If they give you the center and the radius, it's pretty much just plug and chug. So let's check to make sure that we're correct. Yep, there we go. So all we needed to do was substitute in the values for r, h, and k into our standard form and simplify our equation. Awesome. All right, let's move on to the second example that we have. Okay. So the next thing they want us to do is they want us to graph a circle. Okay. So in order to graph a circle, there's two things that you need. You have to know the radius and you have to know the center of the circle. Okay, those are the two things. So we know from standard form, all right, we know that our center is always represented by HK, and we know our radius is represented by R. So as we look at this equation, we know that if it's in standard form, we know that it's x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. Okay, so this time we have to pull that information out of the equation. So here, as we're looking at this first part, this x minus h part, we see that the number 3 is here. Okay, so when we are pulling that number out of the equation, we're always going to pull out the opposite sign, because in the definition, because of this minus, whatever value was plugged in there changed signs automatically because of this minus. So since we see a +3 here, when we're writing our center, that's actually going to be -3, okay, for our h. Now, as we go to try to identify what k is, we're going to do the same thing. When you pull that value out of the equation, you're going to pull out the opposite sign. So because there's a -2 in here, when we go to identify the circle, it's actually going to be a +2. Okay, so don't forget that if you're given the equation in standard form and they're asking you to identify h and k, when you pull them out, you're always going to pull the values out in their opposite sign. Okay. All right, the last thing that we need is r. So on this part of the equation, it's always equal to r squared. So we don't need to know what r squared is. We need to know what r is. So in order to find it, we're going to solve the equation. So our r squared equals 16. So we're going to set r squared equal to 16. And we know that in order to undo a squared power, you're going to take the square root of both sides. So r is equal to the square root of 16, which is 4. Okay. Now we also know that when you take the square root of a number, you also have the negative answer and the positive. The radius will always be the positive value. It will never be the negative value. So you do not have to worry about it. You can throw it out. So now we have all the information that we need in order to graph our circle. We have the center and the radius. So what I'm going to do, see if I can make this a little smaller for us. I'm going to go ahead and draw my coordinate system. I'm going to plot my center first. So they told me my center is at negative 3, 2. So that means I'm going to go to the left 3, and I'm going to go up 2. I'm going to go ahead and plot my center. And then my radius is 4. So what that's telling me is that 4 from every direction from the center is going to be the outer rim, the circumference of that circle. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go 4 to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to go 4 up. So let me draw those marks. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Here. I'm going to go 4 to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm also going to go 4 down from my center. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Put this one back. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so I went 4 out from each direction. So I kind of made a little square around my center. And then I'm going to go ahead and connect those. All right, so it's okay if your circle looks like an egg like mine. I am not an artist, but you get the point. So the radius is the fixed distance from the center. So that's why I went 4 out in each direction and then simply connected them. So awesome. If they ask me for my center, I have it. If they ask me for my radius, I have that as well, and my graph. So let's look at their solution, which is probably going to be a lot prettier than mine. But you can see here they followed the same steps that we did. They identified h and k by plugging out the opposite values and the radius. And then once they had all of that information, they went ahead and they drew their circle. They plotted 4 points out just like I did. 4 up, 4 down, 4 to the right, and 4 to the left of their identified circle. So awesome. So now you guys know how to identify the radius, the center, and you can graph a circle. Awesome.